Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, today I want to share a powerful truth with you. God is always speaking. The question is, are we listening? God speaks to us in many ways, and one of the most profound ways he communicates is through the people he places in our lives. Whether we realize it or not, the people we encounter, family, friends, mentors, strangers, and even those we may not get along with, can all serve as vessels for God's messages. Often we are so focused on looking for divine signs that we overlook the simple yet powerful ways God speaks through human interactions. Consider a time when you are feeling lost, confused, or discouraged. Maybe you are struggling with a decision or going through a tough season in life. Then, out of nowhere, a friend calls you, offering words of encouragement, or a stranger shares a story that resonates deeply with what you're going through. Perhaps a family member gives you advice that provides much needed clarity. These moments are not coincidences. They are divine appointments orchestrated by God to guide and uplift you. God uses people to speak truth into our lives. When we pray for direction, wisdom, or comfort, he often answers by sending someone who has the exact words we need to hear. A teacher who inspires us to pursue our dreams, a mentor who challenges us to grow, or even a child who reminds us of the beauty of faith and simplicity. These individuals are reflections of God's voice. Sometimes his message comes in the form of correction. We may not always like to hear the truth, but God places people around us to help us see where we need to improve, guiding us toward a better path. Not all of God's messages come from those we expect. There are times when he speaks through unlikely sources, someone we barely know, an old acquaintance we haven't spoken to in years, or even a person we consider difficult. These encounters can be challenging, especially when the message is not what we want to hear. But if we remain open and discerning, we may realize that even in conflict or criticism, there is a lesson or a hidden blessing. God can use anyone, even those who frustrate us, to refine our character and help us grow spiritually. Encouragement is another powerful way God speaks through people. Have you ever been on the verge of giving up when someone unexpectedly reassured you that you were on the right path? Perhaps you were doubting your abilities when a mentor affirmed your potential. These moments are God's way of reminding you that he sees your struggles and is sending support through others. Sometimes, a single kind word can change the course of a person's life, lifting them from despair to hope. God also speaks through people in moments of service and kindness. A stranger helping you when you least expect it, a neighbor showing you generosity, or a friend going out of their way to be there for you. These are tangible reminders of God's love in action. His presence is felt not just in words, but in deeds, in the way people care for one another. When we are on the receiving end of kindness, we experience God's grace. And when we extend kindness to others, we become instruments of his voice as well. To truly hear God through people, we must be attentive and receptive. It's easy to dismiss advice, ignore encouragement, or brush off unexpected encounters as random events. But when we open our hearts and minds, we begin to see how intricately God weaves our lives together. Every conversation, every interaction, every relationship carries the potential for divine wisdom. The key is to listen not just with our ears, but with our spirit. When we ask God for guidance, we must also pay attention to the people he places in our path. Whether through a heartfelt conversation, an act of kindness, or even a difficult lesson, God is speaking. The question is, are we truly listening? Life is filled with unexpected twists and turns, and sometimes we face challenges that leave us feeling frustrated, confused, or even defeated. When things don't go according to our plans, it's easy to wonder why. We question setbacks, delays, and disappointments, not realizing that these very moments may be God's way of speaking to us. Circumstances, whether positive or challenging, are often divine messages meant to guide, teach, and protect us. When doors close in our lives, we often see them as failures or missed opportunities. Perhaps you applied for a job that seemed perfect, only to receive a rejection. Maybe you poured your heart into a relationship but didn't work out. At the time, these moments can feel painful, even unfair. However, what we see as rejection, God may be using as protection. That job might not have been the right fit. That relationship might have distracted you from your purpose, or that delay might have been necessary to prepare you for something greater. God sees what we cannot. While we focus on the immediate, He sees the bigger picture. Sometimes He removes people, opportunities, or plans from our lives because they would not have served us well in the long run. It is in these moments of disappointment that we must trust that He is working behind the scenes for our good. What seems like a loss now may later be revealed as a blessing in disguise. Difficult circumstances also serve as lessons. When we go through hardships, we often ask, why is this happening to me? But a more powerful question is, what is God teaching me through this? Challenges refine us, build our character, and draw us closer to Him. Think about times in your life when you face struggles, perhaps financial difficulties, health issues, or personal setbacks. In hindsight, many of those struggles likely shaped you into a stronger, wiser, and more compassionate person. Sometimes God uses circumstances to shift our direction. We may be on a path that feels comfortable, but it may not be the one God intends for us. When obstacles arise, they can serve as signals that we need to change course. If everything is suddenly difficult, doors keep closing, or we feel unrest deep in our spirit, it could be God's way of nudging us toward a different, better path. Timing is another way God speaks through circumstances. We live in a fast-paced world where we want immediate results, but God operates on a perfect timeline. There may be things you are praying for, working toward, and dreaming about, but they have not yet come to fruition. Instead of seeing delays as denials, consider that God may be saying, not yet. He may be preparing you for something greater, strengthening you for the responsibility that comes with the blessing you are asking for. When we learn to trust that every circumstance carries a divine purpose, we begin to see life differently. Instead of becoming discouraged by setbacks, we start seeking the lesson or the redirection. Instead of complaining about obstacles, we look for the opportunity they present. The key is to remain open, patient, and faithful, even when things don't make sense. God is always speaking through our circumstances, but we must be willing to listen. Rather than resisting the challenges or feeling defeated by disappointments, we can ask ourselves, what is God revealing to me through this situation? When we embrace this perspective, we find peace even in difficult moments, knowing that every challenge, delay, and unexpected turn is part of a divine plan designed for our ultimate good. Nature has always been one of the most profound ways God speaks to us. From the vastness of the sky to the smallest flower blooming in a quiet corner, creation reflects His presence, power, and love. The natural world is not just something to admire, it is a direct message from God, constantly reminding us of His wisdom, provision, and faithfulness. Yet in our busy lives, we often overlook these signs. If we take the time to observe and reflect, we will realize that God is speaking through nature every single day. One of the most awe-inspiring ways God communicates through nature is by revealing His majesty. When you stand before a towering mountain, watch waves crash against the shore, or gaze up at a sky full of stars, you can't help but feel a sense of wonder. These moments remind us of how small we are in comparison to God's greatness. The vastness of the universe declares His infinite power, showing us that He is in control of all things. No matter how overwhelming life may feel, nature reassures us that the same God who holds the galaxies together is the one who is watching over us. God also uses nature to teach us about trust and provision. Consider the birds in the sky. They do not worry about their next meal, yet they are fed daily. The trees go through seasons, blooming in spring, flourishing in summer, shedding leaves in autumn, and appearing lifeless in winter, only to come back to life again. These rhythms of nature mirror the seasons of our own lives. Sometimes we flourish and sometimes we endure hardships, but just as the trees know that spring will return, we can trust that God is always working behind the scenes, bringing renewal and provision at the right time. Another powerful way God speaks through nature is by showing us patience and growth. A seed does not become a tree overnight. It takes time, nurturing, and sometimes difficult weather conditions to grow strong. In the same way, we may be going through a season of waiting, wondering why things are not happening as quickly as we would like. But just as nature takes its course, God is developing us in ways we may not yet see. The process may be slow, but every challenge we face is shaping us into who we are meant to be. Nature also teaches us about resilience. Have you ever seen a flower bloom through a crack in the pavement? Despite harsh conditions, it finds a way to grow and thrive. This is a message from God, reminding us that no matter how difficult our circumstances may be, we have the strength to overcome. Even in the toughest environments, life finds a way, and so can we with God's help. Beyond its lessons, nature provides peace and renewal. When life feels overwhelming, stepping outside and taking in the beauty of creation can bring a sense of calm. The sound of rain, the rustling of leaves, or the warmth of the sun can remind us that God is near. Spending time in nature allows us to disconnect from distractions and reconnect with His presence. It is in these quiet moments that we often hear His voice most clearly. God's messages through nature are everywhere. We just need to pay attention. Every sunrise is a reminder of new beginnings. Every storm is a lesson in endurance. And every sunset is a sign of rest and closure. When we learn to see the natural world as a reflection of God's love and wisdom, we begin to recognize that He is speaking to us constantly, guiding us, teaching us, and reminding us that He is always with us. One of the most personal and direct ways God speaks to us is through our hearts, that still, small voice within. The quiet nudges, the inner convictions, and the unexplainable sense of peace or unease is often God's way of guiding us. While we may look for external signs, God frequently communicates in subtle yet powerful ways through our thoughts, emotions, and conscience. The key is to recognize His voice and be willing to listen. There are moments when we feel an unshakable urge to take action. Perhaps we feel a sudden inspiration to reach out to someone, to pursue a new opportunity, or to make a decision we had been hesitant about. These urges, when aligned with wisdom and righteousness, are often God's way of leading us towards something greater. Have you ever felt a strong pull to call a friend, only to find out they were going through a difficult time and needed encouragement? That wasn't a coincidence. It was God speaking to your heart, prompting you to be a vessel of His love. At times, God speaks through a sense of conviction. We all have moments when we know deep down that something is not right, when we feel uneasy about a decision or sense a warning in our spirit. This is God's way of protecting us. Sometimes we ignore these feelings because they may not align with what we want. However, when we go against that inner warning, we often find ourselves in situations that could have been avoided. Learning to recognize and obey these convictions can keep us from unnecessary pain and lead us toward a path of righteousness. Peace is another way God communicates through our hearts. When we are in alignment with His will, we often experience an unexplainable sense of peace, even in difficult situations. Conversely, when something is not right, we may feel restless, uneasy, or burdened, even if everything appears fine on the surface. Have you ever made a decision that didn't make logical sense, yet you felt complete peace about it? That peace is often God's confirmation that you are on the right path. God also speaks through our desires, but it's important to distinguish between selfish wants and God-given passions. When we seek Him and grow in our faith, our desires begin to align with His will. The things we long for, whether it's to help others, to pursue a certain career, or to embark on a new journey, may be God planting seeds in our hearts for the purpose He has designed for us. If a dream keeps resurfacing in your heart, if a passion continues to burn inside you despite obstacles, it may be God's way of showing you the direction He wants you to take. However, hearing God's voice within requires a quiet and open heart. In a world filled with noise, distractions, and countless opinions, it can be difficult to tune in to God's whispers. This is why time in prayer, meditation, and reflection is essential. When we take the time to be still, to disconnect from the chaos, and to truly listen, we begin to hear Him more clearly. God is always speaking through our hearts, but we must be willing to listen and trust. His voice may not always be loud or obvious, but it is always present, gently guiding us, comforting us, and leading us toward His best for our lives. When we learn to recognize His voice within, we gain clarity, direction, and a deeper connection with Him. Listening to God's voice in our hearts is not just about hearing, it's about trusting and following, knowing that He will never lead us astray. Many people expect God to speak in grand, unmistakable ways through dramatic miracles, booming voices from the heavens, or supernatural signs. While God is certainly capable of such displays, He often chooses to speak in subtle, quiet ways through everyday moments. His voice is not always loud, but it is always present. The key is to be attentive and open to hearing Him in the small, ordinary details of life. One of the most common ways God speaks subtly is through gentle nudges or impressions on our hearts. These moments often come unexpectedly, like a thought that urges us to reach out to someone, a sudden realization that brings clarity, or an inner sense of peace or discomfort about a decision. These are not random feelings. They are divine whispers guiding us in the right direction. We may not hear an audible voice, but deep inside, we just know what we need to do. The more we pay attention to these inner promptings, the more we begin to recognize God's voice in our daily lives. God also speaks through the routine events of our day. We may hear a song on the radio that speaks directly to what we are going through, or a message in a book or sermon that feels as though it was written just for us. A simple conversation with a friend may reveal the exact words we needed to hear. These moments may seem small, but they are divine appointments. When we take the time to reflect, we realize that God has been speaking all along. We just need to slow down and listen. Another subtle way God speaks is through closed doors. Sometimes when we desperately want something, whether it's a job, a relationship, or a personal goal, it just doesn't work out, no matter how hard we try. In these moments, we may feel frustrated or even abandoned, but often God is not rejecting us. He is redirecting us. A closed door is sometimes God's way of protecting us from something that isn't meant for us, or preparing us for something better. Instead of feeling discouraged when plans don't go our way, we should ask, what is God trying to show me through this? Nature is another quiet way God speaks. The stillness of a sunrise, the calming sound of rain, the changing seasons, each of these holds a deeper message if we take the time to notice. The sunrise reminds us that each day is a fresh start. The rain symbolizes renewal and growth, and the changing seasons reflect the ebb and flow of our own lives. Just as nature moves in cycles, we too experience seasons of waiting, growing, and flourishing. When we take time to be still and observe the world around us, we often find that God is speaking through His creation. God also speaks through our conscience, gently reminding us of right and wrong. When we feel uneasy about something, that discomfort is often a divine warning to steer clear. When we feel a deep sense of peace, it can be God affirming that we are on the right path. The more we tune into these feelings and seek wisdom, the more we recognize God's quiet guidance in our decisions. The challenge is that in today's world, we are constantly surrounded by distractions. Social media, endless responsibilities, and the noise of everyday life. If we don't take intentional time to be still and reflect, we might miss the gentle ways God is speaking to us. That's why it's important to cultivate moments of silence, whether through prayer, meditation, or simply stepping away from the busyness of life. God's voice is often subtle, but it is always there. If we slow down, pay attention, and open our hearts, we will realize that He is speaking through the little moments, the quiet nudges, and the everyday details of life. We just have to listen. Listening to God requires awareness, patience, and a willingness to be still. In a world filled with distractions, noise, and constant demands for our attention, it can be challenging to recognize His voice. However, when we intentionally slow down, remove distractions, and focus on His presence, we begin to hear Him more clearly. God is always speaking, but the question is, time allows us to tune in to His voice. Another important aspect of listening to God is being aware of the different ways He communicates. His voice isn't always audible or direct. Sometimes He speaks through Scripture, through people, through our hearts, through circumstances, or even through nature. If we are not paying attention, we might miss the subtle ways He is guiding us. The more we cultivate awareness, the more we start to recognize His messages woven into our daily experiences. Patience is also key. God's timing is perfect, but it does not always align with our expectations. We may seek answers and feel as though we are met with silence, but in reality, God is working behind the scenes. Just because we do not hear an immediate response does not mean He is not speaking. Sometimes He wants us to wait, to trust, and to grow in faith before revealing His plan. True listening also requires obedience. When we sense God speaking, whether through a conviction in our heart, an opportunity, or a lesson learned through circumstances, we must be willing to follow His guidance. It is not enough to simply hear, we must act. God blesses those who trust and obey His direction, even when it is difficult or uncertain. By slowing down, paying attention, and being open to His voice, we can develop a deeper connection with God. He is always speaking. We just have to be willing to listen.